I had intended for this to be a quick, rant-style video, but the more I read, and the more specific events evolved as I read, the more it became clear to me that an off-the-cuff response would not suffice. I had originally intended to title this video, Anti-Abortion is About Controlling Women, but even the most cursory research indicates that the consequences of overturning Roe v. Wade would be much more harmful and much more far-reaching than even that. A preface before I begin in full. I had originally intended to provide a simple statement of support for people supporting Roe v. Wade and fighting draconian anti-abortion laws in states such as Utah, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky, and Ohio, including statements concerning the necessity of reproductive health care and the harm that removing it does. I will admit that I personally don't feel comfortable doing this. I've never had to experience, first or second hand, the sort of pain that a lack of reproductive health care causes, and therefore have no authority on that subject. Even so, I would like to state for the record, and so there is no confusion, that every first-hand account of what a lack of reproductive health care does includes incredible, unspeakable harm done to people ought to be enough to keep laws preventing it from being passed. But we do not live in a good and just world. We live in a world where Donald John Trump is the President of the United States, and where an accused serial rapist sits on the Supreme Court. These people do not care about the harm they do. In fact, they are gleefully awaiting the chance to prosecute vulnerable minorities in any way they possibly can. Appealing to their sense of morality is not going to work. We have to try different tactics. Making a better world requires meeting these people where they are and fighting them there. First, we need to understand what Roe v. Wade does and how it does that. The ruling in Roe v. Wade does not make abortion legal. A different decision, Doe v. Bolton, which was issued the same day, seems to have functionally done that. Instead, Roe clarifies that the undue prohibition of abortion is unconstitutional, and makes any law prohibiting that behavior unconstitutional and no longer law. Prior to Roe v. Wade, laws on abortions were decided on a state-by-state basis. If Roe v. Wade was repealed, abortion would not automatically be made illegal. It would once again be decided on a state-by-state basis. In fact, a number of states have trigger laws that would change state law specifically in the case of Roe v. Wade being overturned. The basis for the Roe v. Wade decision was the right to privacy, or the protection from undue government intrusion. This was first established in Griswold v. Connecticut, in which the use of contraceptives was legally enforced by striking down a Comstock law legally prohibiting the delivery of contraceptives by mail. Rather unintuitively, this right to privacy is not the right to do things that you want, but the right to do things that are not illegal without government interference. For example, the right to use and order contraception without that contraception being seized by overzealous postal workers. Logic being that certain actions assume guilt on the party who is being aggrieved, something which the government is expressly forbade from doing. This right to privacy was described as a penumbra, a right not explicitly stated in the Constitution, but which can be inferred from other rights. The majority opinion on Comstock v. Connecticut, written by William Douglas, states, "Various guarantees create zones of privacy. The right of association contained in the penumbra of the First Amendment is one, as we have seen. The Third Amendment, and its prohibition against the quartering of soldiers in any house in times of peace without the consent of its owner, is another facet of that privacy. The Fourth Amendment explicitly affirms the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. The Fifth Amendment and its self-incrimination clause enables the citizen to create a zone of privacy which the government may not force him to surrender to his determent. The Ninth Amendment provides, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. The Roe decision is a linchpin in how the right to privacy is understood in a legal context. This right to privacy is vital in the protection not just of access to reproductive health care, such as contraception and abortion, but in the protection of gender and sexual minorities. The right to privacy overruled laws criminalizing sodomy, and was the basis of equalization of marriage rights. Furthermore, I have a suspicion that when, not if, but when, people start crafting arguments against the federal prohibition of specific illicit substances that have been decriminalized in parts of the country, the right to privacy will be a vital part of those arguments. And the ramifications of those specific arguments will be, not could be, but will be, much more far-reaching than most people would presume. Without the precedent of Roe v. Wade, the right to privacy is limited to access to contraceptives. I have come to believe that these attacks on Roe v. Wade are not just about restricting access to reproductive health care. I believe that these attacks on Roe v. Wade are an effort to reshape the last 50 years of forward momentum in civil rights. If Roe is overturned, then not only is equal marriage at risk, but it's possible that sodomy laws could be reintroduced. If Roe is overturned, specific healthcare needs for trans people and disabled people could be severely restricted, on the same basis that reproductive health care is restricted. If Roe is overturned, it is conceivable that the right to contraceptives at all could be at risk, and things that are vitally needed right now could be stalled indefinitely. This is not malicious speculation. We know that the people who oppose access to reproductive health care generally also oppose the rights of sexual and gender minorities, and generally also oppose the civil rights in a broad sense. To suggest that the legal strategy these people employ is congruent with their stated moral values is not disingenuous. In fact, suggesting otherwise, as some far-right scholars have, is disingenuous. We are also seeing corporations refuse to enforce their own terms of service in defense of sexual and gender minorities when the people breaking those terms of service are sufficiently popular, or provide the corporation with sufficient ad revenue. And that's to say nothing of maintained attacks on the same people by the federal and state governments, which is where we started. The threat against Roe v. Wade is not just a threat to reproductive health care and anyone who may need it. The threat against Roe v. Wade is ultimately a threat to every person in this country, and people of good conscience have a responsibility to oppose it in any way they are able. We don't live in a good and just world. We won't live in a good and just world. We won't get there until we get out and start working towards it. If you found this video to be informative or helpful in any way, then please, please, please share it in any space you think it will be well received. Feel free to take the video down and put it on your own channel, or make your own video on the same topic. I am both puzzled and alarmed that this specific argument in favor of Roe v. Wade is not more widely available. Thank you for listening, and take care of yourself.